This is The Guide Gals, a modern, wedding-focused podcast by the experts at Here Comes the Guide. I'm Chelsea, a designer and inspired creative who's probably racked up over 10,000 hours on Pinterest, and the friend who's going to shoot it to you straight.
And I'm Caroline, a social media manager who's obsessed with dogs as ring bearers and will inevitably cry over your wedding video. We've seen it from all sides. We've been brides, planners, bridesmaids, and have worked with standout brands throughout the industry.
Think of us as an extension of your wedding party and hang out with us as we share the ins, outs, ups, and downs of the road to I Do.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Guide Gals podcast. We're excited to talk about a lot of fun things today, and I know we say that every week, but you guys stick with us. It really is going to be really fun. And there's a lot of things that you can get caught up with in the wedding planning process, and that's why we're here. There are many traditional, and I say that in quotes, wedding elements that you'll come across that are actually optional. So when it comes down to it, all you need is you and the person you're marrying. And okay, there's legalities like a marriage certificate that you should probably get too, but everything else is kind of just like the icing on the cake. And that's what we're going to kind of work through today and just see what you can take and what you can leave in the wedding planning process.
Truly, yes. Truly everything is optional. You can make your wedding your own. It's your wedding day. And so I think by just thinking about the things that you want to prioritize, that'll let you know, figuring out your non-negotiables, all of that good stuff, that'll let you know what things you might want to dump a little bit more of your budget into. But there truly are a lot of expenses that you can skip if they don't really mean something to you, and it can in the long run save you a lot of money, especially if you're a more budget conscious couple or you're just wanting to allocate your funds somewhere else. I know a lot of people want to spend more money on their honeymoon rather than their big day.
Yes.
So
before we jump into the episode though, I need to talk about our beverages today because as always, we're beverage obsessed. And today I have something a little bit different than I feel like I usually have. I have a matcha, which I love matcha, but I feel like I haven't had them in a while, mostly because to get a good matcha, it takes some effort. And like you have to get the right, the right matcha, the right routine. This is my like cheat method to it. I think you guys have heard me talk about my cold brew concentrate. They also have a matcha concentrate, which I decided to try.
Ooh.
And I like. It's not my favorite matcha in the world because it does come already like pre-sweetened. So I love like matcha with lavender.
so good.
And this is a lavender matcha, but it's just like a little too sweet because the matcha is already sweetened and the lavender syrup is sweetened. So got to figure out those like proportions, but it is a quick and easy way to get a matcha, and I am slurping it down right now.
I haven't had matcha in a long time either, and I really like it. I, for a while, was getting like hot ones, and it's summer. If I don't know when you're watching this, but right now I feel like we have just exited like a major heat wave. So a hot matcha is like not the vibe, but I haven't had an iced one in so long, probably because I don't make them very good myself. You sent me some matcha though. You sent me some matcha like over a year ago. I still haven't gone through that little tub of it, but it's really good.
It's good.
I need to return to matcha. I think you may have inspired me.
Good.
Yeah, but today I'm drinking also tea, not matcha. It's a can of this. It's called Steez. I haven't had these in a really long time, but yeah, they're really delicious.
What flavor is it?
Raspberry.
I like their peach green tea.
I had that one yesterday. Yep.
Yeah. It's so good.
They're really good.
We love a good beverage, and I can't wait for the fall beverages. Probably by the time you hear this episode, I think are you guys early September when you're actually listening to this episode?
I think that's the
or
schedule.
If you're listening to this or if you're listening to this like months afterwards, so be it too. But just know that we are fully anticipating fall beverages at this moment, and I think that's like my favorite. I mean, fall is my favorite time of year. Fall beverages are coming so soon, and I can't wait.
Yeah, I can't wait. We're both like not summer girls.
No.
I'd like to say we're not haters, but like I'm kind of a hater. I don't like to be hot and sweaty. But yeah,
Same.
The season change, I'm really looking forward to.
Really quickly before we jump into the episode, I want to tell you guys about my side quest this weekend. In our intro, we always say like we've been brides, planners, bridesmaids, we've been vendors, we've been like all of these different things. This past weekend, I checked off 2 new vendor titles off of my list. Not that I have like a list that I'm like trying to check off, but now I do. This past weekend, I was a content creator for a wedding and I was a photographer for a wedding, which was crazy. The wedding that I did content creation for is my friend Lola. I met her in college and now she has quite a big following on TikTok. She's like 250,000 followers. You should follow her. She does really wonderful like everyday fashion and is just so sweet. And got to do content creation for her. Her day was beautiful. Beautiful. I think at some point, if we could get her on the podcast, I would love it because she had this beautiful chic wedding, but she did a lot of things on a budget. Her veil was $20 and you'd never know. Like she kept talking about it at the wedding too. Like everyone at the wedding had to have known that it was $20, but it looked incredible. It looked so
It
good.
was very pretty. I watched from
Yeah.
afar of like from the content that you created, and you did a really great job.
Thank you. Thank you. It was so fun. And I think my position at Here Comes the Guide, I'm the social media manager. You've heard me talk about that before. I think it really prepped me for a lot of that. So it was super fun. And then I was a photographer for another wedding. This wedding was so laid back. Quite honestly, I love photography. Chelsea and I both kind of dabble in photography in our free time. I've never wanted to do wedding photography. It just like stresses me out too much.
It's a lot of pressure.
It's a lot of pressure. There's a lot going on. But this couple is I've known the woman for a long time. This is both of their second marriages. So the tone of the wedding just felt way different than, I don't want to say a normal wedding, but kind of. They just like, everything was so laid back. It was such an emphasis on the people that were there. It felt like family photos almost. Like it was just very different. So I don't know if I'm like itching to do another wedding again soon, but I had a lot of fun doing this one. And it was just cool to, I don't know. I wanted to share that with you guys that like when we say we've done a lot of things in the wedding industry, we kind of mean it.
Yeah, I mean, you way more than me. I think I think I like dabbled in like a different side of things, but you are like really in there. Like really in the trenches of
Yeah.
wedding days. I know that you've played a lot of roles when it comes to weddings, and I've honestly never even been a
Yes.
bridesmaid before. So, yeah, like you have a lot of experience there, so.
Yeah, and I love it. But yeah, don't ask me to do things because I will say yes.
Yeah,
Um,
that's what's gotten you there.
yeah, that's the insider info. So don't ask me because I will say yes. And I need to learn how to say no.
All right, so getting into some expenses that you can skip if you would like to. Number one, we're going to talk about is an expensive venue. So your venue is going to be a really big cost when you break down like the budget percentages. And so, yeah, I mean, like that's something that you can expect up front. But you don't have to always choose like the most expensive one. There are lots of options and some like more out of the box options that you can think through depending on your location and time of year, all of that good stuff. There are a lot of alternative locations that could end up saving you a lot of money. So, things to think about, you could even opt for like a backyard wedding, like if you have a family member or yourself that has like a really beautiful space. Beaches, there's some public beaches that you could do, or like a public park. Of course, you want to make sure that you actually have permission if it's needed to get married in these kind of like more public spaces. But yes, there are a lot of options out there, and it doesn't have to follow like, we're going to talk about a lot of things breaking like that more traditional like set of rules that aren't really rules in this, but you can break tradition in this way too. So yeah, and these alternative spaces can offer like a lot of character and like bonus points if you find something that really like plays into your love story with your partner.
Yeah.
That's just really cool. One thing that you want to think about with this, so if you are using a space that's maybe like not traditionally a wedding venue, there are going to be downsides. So like you're not going to have likely like a coordinator that comes with the venue to help you with like day of things. This might be something you can source outside or just something that you'll have to like wrap your head around being without. You're also not going to have like furniture, equipment, like all of that stuff. You might have to rent chairs from somewhere and bring all of those in. I think I've mentioned this on another episode before. I had a cousin that got married in a family barn, and they had to bring everything in, and which that's an added expense. I'm sure. I don't know her like budget details for her wedding. It's still possible to save money on a venue in this way, but you can't just think, oh, it's completely free. There are things that you have to do. So I know they got like some lights and strung up some string lights themselves. They put in a dance floor. They rented bathrooms, like portable bathrooms that were like a step above a porta potty. Like they were actually nice. Like look into them if you're curious. They can actually be very nice. But yeah, tables, chairs, everything they had to rent. So yeah, they had to bring all that stuff in. There's downsides. And if you get married at the beach or a park, like keep in mind, like someone might be like, if you're at a park, like going on a bike ride, like nearby, they don't know that you're having a wedding. And if you're at the beach, like people might be around, you know, a lot of times people are respectful. Sometimes they're not. So just like you have to think about those things, but
yeah. The expense of a venue is so large.
Yeah.
And we prioritized finding a space that like would really fit our budget. And not even fit our budget, but like save us money ultimately. So the chapel that we were going to get married at, I got a discount because I was a student at the college where this chapel is located. So it was much cheaper. I think it was like a $400 rental fee. And then the reception venue I got for free because it was where I was working, had a large space that would accommodate like a large wedding reception. So because we essentially like $400 at that point feels like free for like both the ceremony and reception
that's
venue.
a very good deal.
Yes, it was a great deal. Now, was it the perfect aesthetic that I wanted for the reception venue? No. We were going to have to put a little bit more money into making it look the way that I wanted it to. The building space had, I think, at one time been a grocery store and then a furniture store, and like then it was renovated. So it was going to take a little bit of effort, but I mean, for $400 total for my rental fees for venues, like we were going to make that work. It was going to be totally fine. And so we did have to get a little bit creative. Ultimately, though, of course, we ended up getting married at the summer camp where we met at, and that was also free. I think because the camp director had pity on us during that time and like felt bad of everything that we were going through, and we ended up getting that rental for free. But
yeah, but I love that
creative.
Like that is an alternative space, of course, but I love that personal connection that you have with the ceremony spot being like, I don't know, it's like part of your story. I think that's just really cool. So yeah, maybe it wasn't like exactly what you pictured, but like the fact that it like, I don't know, has that personal thing. I think that's awesome.
Yes. So another expense that you can skip is a wedding party. Now I know this is like a fun part of the experience, like having your bridesmaids, your groomsmen, whoever that may be, stand by your side. Maybe you could pick one or two people to be a part of that wedding party, because the larger your wedding party gets, the more expensive it gets. If you think about the gifts that need to be bought for them or accommodations that you want to provide for things that they need to buy too, it becomes a little bit less expensive. There are a lot of associated to logistics that go into having a large wedding party. And yeah, if you want to save yourself some money and make it a little bit more intimate and thoughtful, this can be kind of the route to go. It can also be like a good in between. So the wedding that I mentioned before that I did content creation for this weekend, Lola had her sister as the maid of honor, and then didn't have any other bridesmaids. But when I got there, she had her closest friends getting ready with her still. So they weren't, technically in the wedding party, but they were still being able to make those memories together. They still had a bachelorette party with all of their friends, and just like reduce the logistics, reduce the costs. Like they didn't have to do like 7 different bridesmaid bouquets. They didn't have to have a huge like head table with all of the wedding party on each side. So they each had one person, and I think that was perfect, but everyone was still involved in a way that really made the day feel so special. So I think this is a good place where if that feels like your vibe, definitely just go for 1, 2, keep it small, forego entirely if you want to, but then you can still include the elements that you want to include.
Yeah, this is a great idea. And like, I think that there's a lot of pressure too. Like if you're someone like probably like Caroline, who has just like a huge group of friends, that can get really expensive. If you're like, well, I want to have a wedding party, I don't want to leave anybody out. If that list is going to be really long and you're kind of even nervous about like the hierarchy of things, or like if you think someone's feelings are going to get hurt, I don't know, having like the 1 or 2 people, like a sister or whoever that might be, it saves you money. Like for sure, it can save money, but it can also like, I don't know, like save, I don't know, awkward situations or something. But yeah, just like you mentioned, there are ways where you can include your friends, like as many of your friends as you want and things like this. I've seen people do like bachelorette parties even, where it's like maybe they have a wedding party or whatever, but their bachelorette party invite list goes beyond that wedding party, and it's just like a big girl party. Like all the friends are invited, like
Yeah.
which I think is really fun. There's lots of things you can do to like save money in that way and still make people feel included or make sure that you are capturing what you want to capture.
Yeah, I feel like you're just picking the best parts of what a wedding party offers without adding the expense that comes with it.
Right. Okay, the next expense that you can skip, we kind of touched on this in our last one, but pre-wedding events. There are no rules that says you have to have all of these super formal events leading up to your wedding day. You just don't have to. And if you want to have all those events, like if you want to have the shower and the bachelorette party and all of those things, there are ways that you can do it in a super affordable way. So like I said, with that bachelorette party where maybe it's like something more casual where you invite a lot of friends, but you don't like go on a trip to Fiji. Maybe you just like have a sleepover, like a big like sleepover. How fun would that be? Like returning to like childhood. Big sleepover, order pizza, like play games, watch movies. Like that is so fun. You can create those special memories for like much lower of a budget. And like even things like bridesmaids gifts and all of that stuff, like you don't have to get super crazy with all of that like to have a bachelorette party. But yeah, and like a shower, like if you want to have a shower or like an engagement party, you can still have those things on a budget for sure. Or you can skip them entirely. If you're like, I don't really even want to do that, like you don't have to.
And I think these small gatherings can often be something that leads to like, again, more meaningful connections. This like really intentional, small, intimate feel. And I love this. Like I love that. I do think there is a shift towards these types of things where I see weddings getting smaller or any sort of like, again, like those pre-wedding events, so like feeling very small, intimate, and the focus is more on the people than it is like, I don't know, the glitz and the glam of it all. You can still have the glitz and glam of it all if you want, but I love that aspect of it. I've seen a lot of really cool, this isn't like a non-expensive pre-wedding event, but some of the celebrity events that I've seen of their pre-wedding occasions, for some reason, the vibe to me just feels like the people are what matters. And I think that's the essence of it, really, is that like these pre-wedding events, it's your closest people that are usually at these. And so putting that emphasis there, I think will translate really well into that intimate and like really connected feeling.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, one of the next things is an engagement session. So I guess before I even jump into this, you should listen to all of our episodes if I'm being totally biased, but I think our photography episode that released pretty recently with Jenny, we did a big Q&A with her. She's a wedding photographer, or used to be a wedding photographer for many years, and we like dove into all of these things. Now, you don't necessarily need an engagement session. That's why this is on our list. Like we're saying, this is an expense that you can reduce it on, but we do want to carry that also in light of what Jenny has kind of given us as an example of like from her perspective as a photographer. So we want to kind of give you both sides. So an engagement session is not something you necessarily need. It is a great way for you to, get in front of a camera with your partner and like it's a test run, especially a lot of times for the photographer that you hire. It's a great way for you to get to know them, for them to get to know you, to see your dynamic as a team. And then also it kind of gives you a little sneak peek into what your wedding photos can look like. Again, on another episode, Mackenzie Richards, and I believe that's episode 11 or 12. But
it'll be linked in the show notes for you. We'll link the correct one.
Make sure to check there. But you can hear Mackenzie talk about her experience with an engagement session, that they had one and they didn't like the photos. And so they chose a different photographer for the wedding day. And so there are a lot of benefits to having an engagement shoot. And we want to say that now, like from a photographer standpoint and from you as a couple. But sometimes like a time frame doesn't allow for an engagement session. I had a short engagement and we opted not to do engagement photos. Totally fine. And it worked out for us. And we had actually just gotten some pictures recently that weren't necessarily professional, but we put them on like save the dates types of things. Blah, blah, blah. They are valuable. But if you're on a tight budget and you don't want to allocate more money towards that, that's okay. It's not something you absolutely need to do. It's something that you can push off to the side, but just, I think, make that note that if you're not doing an engagement shoot, just meet with your photographer a little bit more so that you can have that time to, get to know them, find out your dynamic as a team because you spend a lot of time with your photographer on the day of your wedding, but then you can save a little bit of money there.
Yeah, this it really comes down to like your non-negotiables, what you guys prioritize, what means the most to you for your wedding day. For me personally, photos matter so much. And I've heard from so many people that like what's an expense that like or what's something that you wish you would have invested more into for your wedding, and they say like photos because like, you know, it's the memories captured and they last forever. But yes, if this isn't something that means a ton to you, or yeah, if you're on a short timeline, or if you're on a really tight budget, there are other options. So in an ideal world, you have the budget to be able to work with the same photographer for both an engagement session and on your wedding day. So you have that relationship building and everything matches. I love that too. Just like the vibe of your photos will match, the editing style, all of the things. But if budget really doesn't allow for something like that, it's okay. You still have options. So, like with what Caroline did, it sounds like you guys just got some photos that were meaningful to you and that you liked, that so you were able to use them for save the dates, whatever. You can do that. iPhones are pretty good. iPhones are pretty good. I don't really know how to use mine so much photo wise, but like they're pretty good. Now, if you have a friend like Caroline, who knows how to use a camera like really well, they might be willing to capture an engagement session for you, or just like a few nice photos. It doesn't have to be anything overboard, just so you can have those memories captured, or like I said, like have something to use on save the dates, whatever. Yeah, that's going to be an option. And yeah, if it needs to be a different photographer on your wedding day, it's okay. Like it's going to be okay.
Yes.
Yeah, but once again, this is just, it comes down to your priorities, what your non-negotiables are. If photography is something you really want to prioritize in your budget, then you'll allocate more to it. But if it's not, you can kind of explore these other possibilities. Okay, the next expense that you can definitely dial it back on are going to be outfit changes. So once again, in like a world where there isn't unlimited budget, like yeah, like let's have outfit changes. Like Caroline and I have talked about this before. Like we love a costume change.
Yes.
We talked a lot about this on like our celebrity wedding episode and like our wedding wardrobe episode. So once again, comes down to priorities and where you want to like trim the fat, like cut the budget down on these things. But you don't have to have like multiple dresses, outfit changes throughout your wedding. Like you just don't. Yeah, like it would be cool. But like in reality, like you do not need this. If you focus on, or if you know that you're like, okay, I'm going to have one dress, I'm going to have one outfit for the entire celebration, focus on something that will transition well when you're dress shopping. Yeah, just think about it. Just think about it. Like how you want it to look like from beginning to end. There are even like, I think this is probably like more of an outdated thing, but weren't there like dresses like back in the day where you could kind of like remove like the bottom and it like turns into a short dress? Maybe things like that still exist. I don't know. Maybe that makes it more expensive. I have no idea. But
I have no idea.
yeah, if you just think about it, and like I know that there's things too, like if you are having a bigger dress, like there are, I forget what it's called, but like where you can kind of like pin up the dress a little bit so that you can dance freely and
Bustle.
stuff. Yeah. Bustle. Yeah, just like figure out what your options are for that. You just don't need to have a bunch of outfits, as fun as it is. It gets really expensive.
Totally. Or like you can buy these outfits from places like Lulu's. You can buy them from places that aren't traditionally thought of as like wedding places. You could rent an outfit change to save a little bit of money. Or you could just change into fun shoes at the end of the night. Like that's also another way that you can do things. Again, call back to Lola's wedding. Sorry, I'm just obsessed with it. She got her wedding dress from House of CB. Stunning, beautiful. You'd never know that it wasn't like traditionally a wedding dress. Way cheaper. And I need to double check where she got her reception dress, but it was just from like a boutique store that was, it's just a white little cocktail dress, way cheaper than anything that would be like a wedding specific attire. So anything that's marked like as a wedding specific attire, automatically it's going to be more expensive. So if you find some other like workarounds, you can do outfit changes at a more reasonable budget, or you can forego them entirely. Okay, an expense that you can cut or reduce at the very least is expensive flowers. Now, we've kind of talked about this on other episodes, but florals, especially fresh florals, can get super expensive. There are a lot of different ways that you can go around this. I've seen so many cool things on TikTok, Instagram of ways, like creative ways to still get this high level look of the decor, but just a lower price tag. So things like I've seen lots of baby's breath being used. You can get tons of baby's breath for a pretty low, reasonable cost, especially on Sam's Club and Costco. Check those places out. And you can still make it look really elevated, but just at a much lower cost. You can forego fresh florals entirely. You could do artificial flowers. You could do, we've talked about in another celebrity wedding where we've seen a lot of potted plants that looked really elevated, really cool. And there's a lot of ways that you can add this fresh greenery to your space and make it really high level decor, but just again, lower that price tag. Another thing that you can do as well is thinking about your venue. Like if you already know that's a place that you want to cut your budget is in the decor or in the florals, choosing a venue that already has a lot of natural beauty, a garden kind of space, a mansion, estate that already has kind of landscaped grounds or just provides natural decor to the space is another great way that you can kind of save money. So if you pair those together, you may not have to buy that many florals. You may just have to buy some bouquets and boutonnieres and then call it a day. And that's another place where you can kind of cut it down. If you are doing fresh florals, you could just have you and your like partner have flowers. Like you could have a boutonniere, you could have a bouquet, and then the rest of your wedding party doesn't have to have them. And like parents and grandparents, you don't necessarily have to give them a boutonniere and corsage. You can forego that cost as well. So there are a lot of different ways that you can kind of pare down that cost when it comes to florals, decor, things like that. And I would say that if you are looking for creative ideas, social media is a great place to look for it. There are so many cool ways that I've seen this being done at a really low cost, and I would love to see what you come up with.
Yeah, and even asking your venue, I think, for advice too. Like if you're going with something that's like really naturally beautiful, like asking questions like, hey, like at this time of year, like I'm trying to save money on like florals, like what's it gonna look like at the time of year that I want to get married? Like are these is there gonna be flowers blooming? Like what's the deal? Because that could be helpful too. I know like we both live in places that have very big season changes, so like venues will look very different like on a day in February versus like a day in June or whatever. So yeah,
but you could also like work that to your advantage of if you are having a winter, especially Christmas time wedding, your decor could just be artificial Christmas trees instead of like lots, or I don't know. There's a lot of things you could do, or maybe the venue's already decorated for that.
Right. Yeah. Just ask them those questions.
Ask the
like,
venue.
Yeah, what does your venue look like at this time of year? Maybe they have like some holiday decor like up and you could say like, hey, does that stay for the wedding? Can it? Like they'd probably be like, okay, less work for us, have to take it down and put it back up. So yeah.
Yes.
The next place where you can save money, this is going to be kind of like the same category. It's just going to be elaborate centerpieces. So this is another decor item. You don't have to go crazy on like the table centerpieces. There's lots of ways that you can pretty easily, I think, DIY this. You could also just do like a pretty like bouquet or even like a plant. I've seen before where people have plants and then like certain people like end up taking those plants home. Like that's kind of cute. Or like I've seen a lot, it's very popular, I think, like if there are table numbers that like people will put like a photo of each member of the couple like at that age. Like if you're at table 2, like here's a photo of both of them at 2 years old. Like that's a pretty affordable way. Like you could like go to a thrift store and get some really cool frames and fill them with photos in that way, and it's meaningful and it's like a cool interactive thing for your guests too. But yeah, I mean, I think like centerpieces can be so beautiful and so elaborate. Like stuff can get like really crazy in a good way, but you don't have to like lead into that. One of those things, once again, that like there's no rule saying that you have to have anything specific.
Right. Another place that we can reduce some of those expenses is in upgraded rentals. Now, I know it can be so tempting, especially when it comes to chairs. I don't know why chairs or maybe chargers or linens, whatever. It does add a lot to the look, but also no one's going to notice if you go with the basics. If you keep the basics for a lot of these things, everyone's going to say, great, cool. No one's going to think about it. And honestly, when I think about photos afterwards, like you're not going to care. That you're not going to look at those photos and be like, oh, I really wish we would have gone with the upgraded rentals. No, you're going to care that you saved money on it. And if it's just a white folding chair versus like what the Chiavari chairs, not a big deal. It really isn't. Like, please trust us when we say that. You're still going to get a wonderful look. I mean, I guess as long as they're not like metal folding chairs, maybe that's where I draw the line.
I'm picturing a really ugly chair as well. Yeah.
I don't know. There's like these plain white folding chairs that I'm thinking of that I'm like, a lot of times I feel like that's the base package, and it could vary at your venue. I, who knows what that's going to end up looking like, but as long as your guests have a safe place to sit and a wonderful place to eat, I think no one's going to notice.
Yeah.
And you can save so much money. These rentals can cost a lot, especially if you have a large guest count. So I think it's just a good place to think twice about, okay, what's my decision going to be?
Yeah, it is. And I think about too, if you're like, you know what, like we really need to cut the budget here. I don't love the look of these chairs or linens or like whatever. Like I'm not
Mm-hmm.
totally in love with these. You could even just like prioritize, like maybe like, hey, like I don't love like the look of like these things at reception. Like, can we like maybe try to focus, like talk to your photographer? Like when we
Mm-hmm.
capture photos, like maybe like not all of the reception photos, but like maybe just say like maybe we can prioritize getting some moments captured like outdoors or like whatever, like so that it's not just like all photos of like the thing that you didn't like that much. And the photos that you're going to love anyway, I always go back to photos, but the photos you're going to love anyway aren't going to be like the detail shots of your decor. Like those are cool,
Right.
but it's going to be like the ones of you like interacting with your spouse or like your
Mm-hmm.
guests or whatever. So I think that's one of those things, especially in planning. It's so easy to get obsessive and be like, oh my God, I want the best of everything. And like now I'm thinking about this tablecloth and like, well, I have to get the super nice one. Like you so don't. Like that's like one of those details that you're
Yeah.
not going to remember, like Caroline said. And your guests
Mm-hmm.
aren't going to be like, wow, this is an incredible tablecloth. Like they're just like not, like they're not going to even realize. So
Right.
yeah. Okay, another expense that you can kind of cut down on is going to be your vendor packages. So, when you are booking vendors, like any of them, most of them will have tiered like package systems. So, for example, I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to go back to photography. Like there might be like different coverage options. So, like a shorter amount of hours for them to be there will probably cost less than like their biggest package, which might include like all of the things. It might even include your engagement session. Like, so that would probably be the most expensive. There's going to be a lot of examples here, like even catering, like there's like different things. Like maybe you get
Mm-hmm.
like you opt for like not the plated dinner and like maybe it's like a buffet style and it's still really good food, okay, but it's going to be cheaper. Like that's
Yeah.
going to be like their cheaper package. So if you
Totally.
want to incorporate all of these vendors at a lower price, you can opt for doing for all of them or some of them just that like
Yeah.
most basic package that they offer. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and once again, this is another one of those places where you're like, oh, but I need the best of the best. Like for some things you might want to like prioritize those, but probably
Mm-hmm.
not for everything. So yeah, figure out your
Yeah.
non-negotiables from there.
Yeah, and that kind of like leads into the next kind of category, which I think pairs well with this, is the past appetizers. So you do not need to have like everyone walking around with like different hors d'oeuvres and like serving them directly to the guests. Like there is a fun in that, but you can also just have a table of like charcuterie boards. You could also have veggie and fruit plates just sitting out for people too. There are a lot of ways that you can still obviously feed your guests, have a nice cocktail hour. Don't skip that. I've been to weddings where they have, and that's never fun. So don't skip it entirely, but there are a lot of ways that you can just, have them available, but they don't have to be served. They don't have to be super elaborate unless you really need to have like pigs in a blanket, whatever. They can be simple and easy and it will save you some money.
Yeah. And this is going to lead into my next thing that I want to talk about, and it's dinner. So hear me out. Like, this is controversial, okay? There are lots of ways, like I mentioned before, that you can cut down on the cost of dinner for everybody. Like I said, you can opt for a buffet style instead of plated. That's going to save a lot of money. Or you can
Mm-hmm.
opt for just more casual options. Like, if you have food to feed people, they're going to be happy. There's also the option that you can skip dinner entirely. If you're
Mm-hmm.
going to do this, tell your guests, okay? Like tell your guests. Like also I
Yeah.
have heard a story too about like people who did just like a bunch of like past like appetizer type foods for their wedding. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
all that it was going to be. And so they spent some extra money on that. And like the past appetizers were really good and there were a lot of them. But the guests didn't know that they weren't getting dinner as well. Like that's what you get. So a lot of them were like, "Oh, I'm full. Like I don't need it. Like whatever." And then the stuff went away and then they didn't get dinner and people were like, "Whoa, I'm hungry." So, anyway, you can do anything with your wedding. Like if you say like, "Hey, like we're not gonna serve dinner. Just make it clear, because weddings can end up being a long day. People will get hangry, not just hungry, hangry. And yeah, just communicate that. Like maybe you have a ceremony and then you have some time in between and then you have your reception or whatever. Maybe people will like go grab a snack on like at by themselves, or like maybe your location is somewhere where it is like very close to like food options, but you're just like not going to provide it. Just make sure and communicate like what, like if you're going to skip dinner or you're going to do something alternative with dinner, communicate it with your guests. I think is important, just so that way like nothing weird happens or people aren't like left like really hungry at the end of the night. But yeah, there are options here, and you could, like I said, there are cheaper options. Like I know a lot of people do the food trucks. I'm not sure if the food trucks are actually cheaper or not. They're more casual,
I
so
don't
it
know.
seems like they might be cheaper. But yeah, you don't by any means have to do like the most expensive plated dinner with like several options like that are just really high end. Like you don't have to do all that. You can
Right.
keep it simple. Like so many people have like served like tacos at their wedding and stuff like that. That's just like a
Yeah.
little more casual, and like
Yes.
that kind of casual food makes people happy. They're familiar with it. It tastes good.
Okay, I'm going to talk about kind of two different things that are very similar. So I'm going to combine them into one. Cost that you can forego is the champagne toast. You can decide just to have champagne for the couple for the wedding party, or just not do that entirely. Honestly, there are very few guests, not very few. Sometimes very few guests will even end up drinking the champagne, so it's just a lot of money that goes to waste. Everyone's happy to cheers whatever drink they have. If they have water, if they have a cocktail, if they have a beer, whatever. You don't have to have champagne to have a toast. So I think this is definitely a place that you can forego it. Sometimes I've seen just, yeah, the couple having it at the wedding party. So if you really want to have champagne, go for it. Absolutely. If that's something you need to have. But it also saves cost on like having to supply champagne glasses.
It's another
And just
rental
like who's
item.
doing that. Yes, who's doing that service too, who's filling them, who's going, like, it provides another job that the caterers have to do potentially, or someone random. And it can just take a lot of time and effort and money and rentals. So that's definitely something you can forgo. There are also a lot of ways that you can reduce cost when it comes to the bar. So if you don't have a totally open bar, that's a great way to reduce the cost. If you serve very specific things or have a very specific, like, just narrowed down menu, that's a great way to still provide alcohol if you want to have a bar option, but just have it be like a little bit less. You can just do beer and wine. That's definitely an option we see a lot of times at weddings, and nobody would blink an eye if that was the case. Or, hosting the bar for a set number of hours and then switching to a cash only bar. That one I think is a little bit harder because you set the expectation that it is somewhat an open bar, and then when it does become cash, like, that's a little hard. But if you're going to do that, you can. It's your wedding. Do whatever you
I've
want.
seen a lot of people do that, honestly, and it's like you can do whatever you want. Once again, just
Yeah.
communicate with your guests. Like have like a little sign
Yeah.
or whatever, and
Yeah. There's a way to do it too. I think I've seen people do, like, if you have a drink ticket or two at each seat, where like that's the number of free drinks that you get, and then you have to pay for it after that. Like, that's a clear way to communicate, like, these are your free drink tickets, and then once you don't have them anymore, or if you want to go take some from another guest who's not going to use them, great, finagle your way around that, like, as a guest. But I think no matter what, if the guests have to pay for anything at any time, communicate that, because they'll need to bring things with them to be able to obtain that alcohol. So just, good communication. But those are some options that you can take if you want to keep the bar to a minimum.
also like they shouldn't be like so clueless to think that like you're going to a wedding. If there's going to be drinking, like you can't always assume that there's going to be an open bar. Like yeah, they can figure it out. Like they will be just fine. They will be so fine, and they're going to be happy to be there to celebrate
Yes.
with you as well. So yeah. Okay, the next expense that you can skip that I'm going to go over is live entertainment of any kind. So you don't need to have like a live band there. If that's something you want to prioritize, then once again, non-negotiables, like work that in, but it's not necessary. You also like there's so many like forms of live entertainment that I've seen, like there's been some drama about it recently, but I've seen like a lot of like those like live painters at weddings. Like that's really cool. You don't have to have it though. Like all of these things, especially with social media, it can just make you feel like you have to have all of the things. But any form of live entertainment, you really don't have to have. You just have to like get married and celebrate with your guests. So
Yeah.
there's that. And then also wedding favors, especially pricing wedding favors. So you don't have to have wedding favors at all. Like I've seen so many times where people like have a wedding favor just for the sake of having a wedding favor because it's like a box they feel they need to check. And people don't even take the items home. Like they're all left all over the place. And yeah, it's like so unnecessary. And it's a big expense, especially if you're getting something that's like, I don't know, expensive. Like, so yeah, if you want to have wedding favors, our advice, I think we've talked about this before, but our advice is to make it functional in some way. Like if it's like a little, like your favorite candy or like something like that, like that's very affordable, maybe depending on what kind of candy you like. And people will probably eat it. Like it's functional. Or like you've talked about like the Pittsburgh cookie table where like that kind of acts as a favor where there's like boxes and they can take cookies home. Like that's really cool too. So if you feel like you want your guests to be able to take something away from the event, it doesn't have to be traditional or super expensive. Or if you're like, I don't really care, then like who cares? Like they don't have to have favors. People, people, I don't think people are expecting it at this point in time. Like I don't think people go to a wedding and expect favors. So all right, so those are going to be all of the expenses that you can totally skip if you want to. The most important thing to remember is that I've said this several times throughout this episode. It's so easy during the planning process to get wrapped up in feeling like you need the best of the best. You need to do all of the things. And especially like social media, like you're comparing stuff. Like I'm sure that if you're planning a wedding, you're seeing so many wedding things on your social media. And it's like, oh my gosh, like they had the live painter, like I have to have a live painter. Like I have to do it. Or like you just like don't. You don't. Like you don't have to have like the best of everything. You absolutely should listen to our budgeting episode, which talks about how to, episode number 1, which talks about how to think about those non-negotiables right away and set a proper budget for yourself. That way, when you have things that you really want to have, like for me, I'd probably really prioritize photography, like I said. So I would probably want to have like that be a bigger investment, and I'd probably want to do like the engagement session and all of that stuff. That would matter to me. I might cut down on some other places. Like I probably wouldn't do favors. Just my personal thoughts. If you wanted an example,
Totally.
No one asked for that, but I provided it. But yeah, at the end of the day, the most important thing is getting married and just having fun.
Absolutely. And on Here Comes the Guide, shameless plug, there are tons of other resources if you want to continue to figure out like where to cut expenses, or like if you just need to figure out how to budget in general. We have an episode on that as the Guide Gals podcast, but Here Comes the Guide also has tons of resources, some of which being there are 21 hidden wedding costs you might forget to budget for, the ultimate wedding budget checklist, how to tip your wedding vendors, and 37 ways to save money on your wedding. So lots of different resources out there, both on the Guide Gals podcast here with us, or on herecometheguide.com. You can see lots of resources to continue to help you keep to that budget and save money.
Yeah, and we will have all of that stuff linked for you in the show notes, so you can easily click on there, which you can find on our website. That's where you can find those show notes, which is theguidegalspodcast.com. And also on our website, you can reach out to us on our contact page. If you have any questions about budgeting or weddings in general, if you want to share an experience, we'd love to hear from you. Also on our website is our full episode library and lots of free resources as well. You can also find us on Instagram at the Guide Gals Podcast. We post a lot of behind the scenes stuff on there, and we'd love to connect over there. We're also on TikTok at the Guide Gals Pod, and all of our episodes you can find on YouTube as well on the Here Comes the Guide YouTube channel. Yep.
And you should find us there.
Yeah.
And you should come talk to us. Slide into our DMs. We'd love that.
We would.
All right, everybody. That's all for today. It's kind of a long episode, but I hope it was helpful. And until the next one, cheers.
Cheers.